All right, get ready, because today we're going deep into the world of international cybercrime, a massive operation that went across something like 20 countries in Africa. We've got reports on Interpol and Afripol's Operation Serengeti. It tackled everything from ransomware to human trafficking. You might be surprised to learn just how connected these crimes are.
Absolutely. And the global issue. The scale is really eye-opening. Over 35,000 victims all over the world, with losses of almost 193 million US dollars.
That's mind-boggling. So let's start with Operation Serengeti itself. Can you give us a sense of how it all happened?
Well, Operation Serengeti ran for 2 months, from September to October of this year. And what's fascinating is they use a very targeted approach, an intelligence-led approach. Think of it like a detective, meticulously piecing together clues. Except here, the clues are digital, and they're scattered all over the world.
So instead of barging in, they were analyzing data, trying to understand the bigger picture.
Exactly. They created 65 cyber analytical reports. These reports are basically files on specific cybercrime threats: who, what, where, and how. And they help law enforcement to prioritize and coordinate their efforts.
Okay, so they had their intel. What were their biggest targets?
Well, they focused on 4 main types of cybercrime: ransomware, business email compromise, digital extortion, and online scams. These are some of the most prevalent and damaging cyber threats out there, according to the 2024 Africa Cyber Threat Assessment Report.
All of those sound familiar. Could you break them down a little bit, starting with ransomware?
Sure. Ransomware is essentially digital kidnapping. Criminals use malicious software to lock you out of your computer or encrypt your files, and then they demand a ransom to give you back access.
So it's like holding your data hostage.
Yeah.
Scary stuff. What about business email compromise?
It's kind of like a digital con. Like, criminals hack into business email accounts, and then they impersonate the real account owner
To trick employees or partners.
into transferring funds or revealing sensitive information.
Sneaky. And digital extortion.
Think blackmail. But in the digital age, criminals threaten to release sensitive information about a person or an organization, unless they're paid off. That could involve, stolen data, embarrassing photos, or even fabricated evidence.
Yikes. So basically a digital protection racket. And lastly, what are online scams?
Well, this is a broad category that covers a whole lot of deceptive schemes. Think of fake online stores, phishing emails that trick you into revealing passwords, or lottery scams promising you've won a fortune.
So basically any way to trick people out of their money or their information online. This all sounds very abstract. Can you give us some real examples of what Operation Serengeti actually found?
Absolutely. One case that shows the complexity of these criminal networks is a credit card fraud scheme. Uncovered in Kenya, the criminals were able to steal a staggering 8.6 million US dollars.
8.6 million. That's a huge amount. How did they manage that?
They were actually able to alter the security protocols of the banking system itself. They basically created a backdoor to steal credit card information.
Wait, so they hacked the system itself, not just individual accounts.
Precisely. And to make things even more complicated, they used fraudulent scripts, kind of like automated programs, to take the money and move it through a network of companies and digital asset institutions.
So it wasn't just one person sitting at a computer. It was a coordinated operation using advanced technology.
Exactly. The investigation found links to the UAE, Nigeria, and even China, highlighting the global reach of these criminal organizations.
This is starting to feel like a spy thriller.
In a way, it is. Thankfully, authorities in Kenya were able to arrest almost 24 people involved in this scheme.
That's a relief. Are there other cases that show this level of sophistication?
Well, there's the case of a Ponzi scheme that was broken up in Senegal. The criminals behind it were able to get money from over 1,800 victims, get over 6 million US dollars.
A Ponzi scheme? You mean like those investment scams, where early investors are paid with money from later investors? I thought those were a thing of the past.
You'd be surprised how many people still fall for them. In this case, the people behind it took advantage of people's desire for quick riches, using sophisticated marketing, and even forging documents to create an image of legitimacy. And what's interesting is when authorities raided their operation, they found over 900 SIM cards.
900? That's one for every 2 victims. What were they doing with so many SIM cards?
They're using them to create and manage multiple fake identities, making it harder to track their movements.
So it wasn't just about the money. It was about creating this complicated web of deception. That level of organization is unsettling.
It certainly is, and it highlights a crucial point. Cybercrime isn't just some lone wolf hacker in a basement. We're talking about organized crime with the resources and strategies to rival traditional criminal groups.
That's a sobering thought. What other cases stand out to you?
There's a case in Nigeria that I think is especially relevant these days, given how much cryptocurrency is growing. In this case, a scammer was arrested for getting more than 300,000 US dollars by promising incredible returns on cryptocurrency investments.
Oh, those crypto scams are everywhere now. Seems like every other ad is promising to make you rich with Bitcoin.
It's a classic tactic, exploiting trends and people's desire to make money fast. What this case shows is that cybercriminals are always changing, finding new ways to use new technologies and tap into people's hopes and fears.
So it's not just about understanding technology, it's about understanding the psychology behind these scams. This makes me think of a question I've had. We've talked about the financial losses, which are obviously significant. But what about the human cost? Are there any cases that really show the impact on victims' lives?
Absolutely. The case that came out of Cameroon is particularly scary. Authorities uncovered a multi-level marketing scheme, but there was a disturbing twist. They were trafficking victims from 7 different countries, forcing them to participate in the scam.
So these people weren't just scammed out of their money, they were being used and controlled.
Exactly. They were lured to Cameroon with promises of jobs and opportunities, but when they got there, their passports were taken, and they were forced to recruit new members into the scheme.
It's like a nightmare. They were trapped, both financially and physically.
Sadly, that's the reality for a lot of cybercrime victims. They're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're real people with real lives that have been turned upside down.
It's a stark reminder that cybercrime isn't just about stolen data or financial losses, it's about human suffering.
And the financial losses in this case are significant too. Investigators think the group made at least 150,000 US dollars in membership fees alone.
It's horrifying to think they were profiting from the misery of others. What other disturbing cases did Operation Serengeti uncover?
Well, in Angola, investigators shut down an international criminal group that was running a virtual casino in Luanda. They mostly went after gamblers in Brazil and Nigeria, taking advantage of their desire for excitement and easy money.
A virtual casino. Sounds almost glamorous in a criminal kind of way.
It might sound that way, but behind that flashy front was a scheme to cheat people. They used a pyramid scheme, where existing members were encouraged to recruit new players, basically turning victims into unknowing helpers.
So not so glamorous after all. Just another version of deception and exploitation.
You got it. The Angolan authorities did a great job in this case, making 150 arrests and taking over 200 computers and 100 mobile phones.
That's quite a haul. It sounds like Operation Serengeti was a huge success. But it couldn't have been just Interpol and Afripol, right?
You're absolutely right. One of the key things we learned from this operation is how important the private sector is.
Interesting. What role did private companies play in this international operation?
Think of it like a team effort. Partners like internet service providers and cybersecurity companies worked closely with law enforcement. They shared intel, analyzed data, and helped stop criminal activity. They were crucial for patching up weaknesses and securing important infrastructure.
So it was a real partnership, combining the power of law enforcement with the technical skills of the private sector.
Exactly. That kind of collaboration is essential in fighting cybercrime, especially when you're dealing with these complicated international networks.
It's encouraging to see that level of cooperation. It gives me hope that we can actually make a difference with this problem.
It's definitely a step in the right direction.
We've covered a lot of ground here. The size of Operation Serengeti, the different types of cybercrime it tackled, and some incredible stories. But what does it all mean for us? What are the key takeaways here?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Cybercrime isn't some far-off problem. It's a global issue that impacts all of us. Operations like Serengeti show us that international collaboration is absolutely essential.
So it's not just a problem for Africa, it's a problem for the whole world.
Exactly. Cybercrime goes beyond borders, and so do our solutions. What's also crucial is that we do more than just react to cybercrime. We need to be proactive in preventing it.
Proactive. What would that look like?
It means investing in cybersecurity education, promoting responsible behavior online, and developing stronger partnerships between governments, organizations, and the private sector. We need to be thinking ahead, anticipating the criminals' moves, and developing strategies to stop them.
So it's not just about catching the bad guys after the fact. It's about making it harder for them to operate at all.
Precisely.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly insightful, if a little unsettling. I have a feeling we've only just started to understand this complex world of cybercrime. What else should our listeners keep in mind as they navigate the digital landscape?
It's important to remember that cybercrime is always changing. What we see today might be completely different tomorrow.
So how do we stay ahead of the curve? What should we be watching out for?
One area that's particularly concerning is the increasing use of artificial intelligence in attacks.
AI. That sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
It may sound futuristic, but it's happening right now. Criminals are using AI to create more sophisticated malware, launch attacks automatically, and even create convincing deepfakes.
Deepfakes, those videos where they make it look like someone is saying or doing something they never did.
Exactly. And as AI technology gets better, these deepfakes are becoming harder to detect, which has serious implications for trust and security online.
It sounds like we're going into a whole new era of cybercrime. What can we do to get ready for this?
We need to start thinking differently about cybersecurity. It's not just about firewalls and antivirus software anymore. We need to develop AI-powered defenses to fight these AI-powered threats.
So fighting fire with fire.
And in a way, yes, but it's also about education. We need to make sure people understand the risks that come with AI and learn how to protect themselves.
So it's a combination of new technology
Yeah,
and making people aware.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, but I'm confident that by working together, we can create a safer and more secure digital future.
Well, on that hopeful note, we'll wrap up part 1 of our deep dive into Operation Serengeti. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore the funding and support behind this massive operation. Until then, stay safe out there in the digital world.
Absolutely. Stay vigilant.
We'll be back soon with more.
See you then. And one thing we haven't really talked about is the money behind Operation Serengeti. These big operations need a lot of resources.
That's true. It's easy to forget about the funding, but it's essential for these things to happen. So who are the main supporters of this initiative?
Well, the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office was a major contributor. Their support really shows their commitment to fighting international crime.
That makes sense. The UK has been involved in global security issues for a long time.
Right. And they weren't alone. The German Federal Foreign Office also gave a lot of money. They knew it was important to deal with cybercrime as a threat that goes beyond countries and needs international cooperation.
It's good to see different countries stepping up and recognizing that we all have a part to play.
Absolutely. And we also had contributions from the Council of Europe.
The Council of Europe, I know they focus on human rights and democracy and the rule of law. How does that connect to cybercrime?
It's all linked. Cybercrime can have a really bad impact on human rights, on democracy, and the rule of law. Online scams can hurt people financially. Disinformation campaigns can undermine democratic processes. And cyber attacks can mess up important services that we all need.
That's a really good point. It's easy to think of cybercrime just in terms of money, but the effects on society are huge.
Exactly. So it makes sense that an organization like the Council of Europe would be involved in supporting something like Serengeti. It's about protecting the foundations of a free and open society.
So we have governments and international organizations involved. You mentioned before that private companies also played a part in Operation Serengeti. Can you tell us more about what they did?
Sure. Operation Serengeti also benefited from the expertise and resources of several key players in the private sector. They really came forward to share their knowledge and tools.
So that's interesting. Which companies were involved?
Well, one of the main partners was Cybercrime Atlas, a nonprofit organization that collects and analyzes data on cyber threats. They provided really valuable insights into cyber criminal networks.
I have heard of them. They're like the detectives of the internet, piecing together clues from the dark corners of the web.
Exactly. They have a crucial role in tracking cybercrime trends and helping law enforcement stay ahead of the criminals.
So they were the intelligence experts, providing the important info to guide the operation.
You could say that. And then we have Fortinet, a global leader in cybersecurity. They were vital in providing the technical know-how and support needed to protect systems and prevent attacks.
Fortinet, the company that makes those really secure firewalls and other security products.
That's the one.
Yeah.
They're right there on the front lines of cybersecurity. So their knowledge and tools were incredibly valuable to the operation.
So they were the ones making sure the good guys had the best defenses against the bad guys. What other companies were involved?
We also had Group IB, a cybersecurity company that specializes in threat intelligence and incident response. They're known for being able to investigate and disrupt cybercriminal groups.
So they were the ones going after the masterminds, trying to understand their tactics and take down their operations.
Exactly. And then there's Kaspersky, a giant in the cybersecurity world. They provided cutting-edge threat intelligence and helped analyze malware samples. This gave investigators a much better understanding of the threats they were facing.
Kaspersky, the antivirus software company.
Yes, they have this huge database of malware and a deep understanding of how it works.
So they were the code breakers, figuring out the digital weapons used by the criminals.
That's a great way to put it. And then we had Team Simru, a company specializing in internet infrastructure analysis. They offered a unique perspective, helping investigators see how data moves across networks and find the infrastructure used by the criminals.
So they were like the map makers of the internet, finding the enemy's hideouts.
I like that analogy. And of course, we can't forget Trend Micro, another leading cybersecurity company, who provided their expertise in threat research and helped create strategies to lessen the impact of the attacks.
So they were the strategists, trying to figure out the best way to defend against these attacks.
Exactly. They helped predict what the criminals would do and come up with countermeasures.
And finally, we had Uppsala Security, a company specializing in incident response and threat intelligence.
They provided really important on-the-ground support, helping law enforcement agencies with their investigations and helping to gather evidence to bring these criminals to justice.
Wow. So many different players, each one with their own unique skills and knowledge.
It was a true team effort, with governments, international organizations, and private companies all working together to fight this common threat.
It's amazing to see that level of cooperation. It really shows how global this challenge is and how important it is to work together. It's really interesting to see how Operation Serengeti brought all these different people together. Governments, organizations, private companies. It really shows how connected the world is, both in terms of the dangers we face and the solutions we need to find.
Yeah. What's especially striking is how much international cooperation was involved. We saw countries from different continents working together for a shared goal.
It reminds us that some problems go beyond borders, and they need global answers. It's not just about one country looking after its own people. It's about realizing that we're all in this together.
Exactly. And that's exactly why groups like Interpol and Afripol are so important. They provide a way for countries to collaborate and share information so they can work together to fight crime that crosses borders.
They're like the bridge between everyone, making sure communication and coordination happen between all these different law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, you could say that. They play a really important role in connecting different legal systems, languages, and cultures, making sure information flows smoothly and actions are coordinated well.
It's incredible to think about the logistics of an operation this big, coordinating teams in 19 different countries, handling data from so many sources, making sure everyone's on the same page must be a huge job.
It definitely takes a lot of organization and expertise, but the results show what we can achieve when we combine our resources and work towards the same goal.
It's a powerful example of what's possible when we put our differences aside and focus on what brings us together. We've talked a lot about the successes of Operation Serengeti, but I'm curious about the tough parts. What were some of the obstacles they had to overcome?
Well, one of the biggest challenges in any cybercrime investigation is the issue of jurisdiction. Cybercrime, by its nature, goes beyond physical borders. A criminal working in one country can easily target people in another, which makes it hard to decide which law enforcement agency has the authority to investigate.
So it's like a legal puzzle, trying to figure out who's responsible for what.
Right, and that's where international cooperation is so vital. Organizations like Interpol and Afripol help to navigate these complicated legal issues, making it easier for different countries to communicate and work together.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act, trying to make sure everyone agrees and works together smoothly.
You could say that. It takes a lot of trust and goodwill between countries. But operations like Serengeti prove that we can overcome these challenges and get real results.
It's inspiring to see what can be done when we collaborate. But I imagine there are technological challenges too. Keeping up with the rapid pace of technology must be a constant struggle for law enforcement.
Absolutely. The world of cybercrime is always evolving. Criminals are constantly coming up with new tools and techniques, finding weaknesses, and staying one step ahead of the law. Law enforcement needs to keep adapting, investing in new tech, training their people, and developing new approaches to fight these ever-changing threats.
It's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse. As soon as law enforcement comes up with something new, the criminals find a way around it.
It can feel like that sometimes, but it's important to remember that law enforcement is making progress. Operations like Serengeti show us that we're not helpless against these threats. We can disrupt criminal networks, bring the people responsible to justice, and protect people from becoming victims.
It's a good reminder that we're not just sitting targets in this digital world. We can fight back. We've talked about the role of law enforcement and international organizations. But what about private companies? What do they do to fight cybercrime?
The private sector plays a very important role, especially in terms of prevention and reducing damage. Companies are on the front lines, developing security solutions, protecting their own systems, and teaching their employees about cyber threats.
So they're not just victims, they're actively involved in fighting cybercrime.
Definitely. They have a strong interest in protecting their own data, their customers' information, and their reputations. They're also often the first ones to find new threats and come up with ways to stop them.
So it's a two-way street between law enforcement and private companies. They need each other to be effective.
Precisely. Law enforcement depends on the private sector for their technical expertise, sharing what they know, and providing resources. And the private sector needs law enforcement for investigation, prosecution, and deterrence.
It shows that we're all in this together. It's not just about individual responsibility or government action. It's a group effort that needs everyone in society to cooperate. So what can people do to protect themselves? In this world that's becoming more and more digital, what steps can they take to reduce their risk?
There are a few things individuals can do to improve their online safety. First of all, be careful about what you share online. Think before you post personal details, financial information, or anything that could be used to identify you, or put your security at risk.
So it's about being aware of your digital footprint.
Yes. Once something's online, it can be hard to control how it's used or spread.
Okay. Be careful about what you share. What else?
Use strong passwords and turn on two-factor authentication whenever you can. This adds an extra layer of protection to your accounts, making it much harder for hackers to get in.
Strong passwords. Two-factor authentication. Got it. Any other advice?
Watch it for emails, links, or attachments that seem suspicious. Don't click on anything that looks weird or comes from someone you don't know. It's better be safe than sorry.
So it's all about being alert and using common sense. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Exactly. And one last thing, keep your software and devices up to date. With the latest security patches, these updates often fix vulnerabilities that hackers could use.
So those annoying update messages are actually important.
They are. They might seem like a pain, but they're really important for staying safe online.
Okay, I'll start paying more attention to those updates. This has been a really informative deep dive. We've covered so much. The complicated world of cybercrime, why it's so important for countries to work together, the changing dangers, and how we can all protect ourselves. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think the most important thing to remember is that although cybercrime is a serious problem, we shouldn't let fear control us. We can protect ourselves. And by working together, we can make the digital world safer for everyone.
That's a great message to end on. It reminds us that we're not helpless against these challenges. We can do something, we can make a difference, and we can create a more secure digital future. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge. This has been a really eye-opening conversation.
You're welcome.
And for our listeners, make sure to check out the show notes for links to everything we talked about and to explore more about Operation Serengeti. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe in the digital world.